Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. How are you doing, folks? Welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. My name is Mike Cantrell. I'm the host. And this week, I think I'm going to talk about all the stuff I've been doing with Correctional Officers Week. I guess we can call it Correctional Officers Month if we want to, because it's been several weeks that I've been out and enjoying. I guess I'm just going to say I've been out and enjoying the positivity that I've seen with some correctional organizations and stuff. And I want to share that with you. I want to talk to you about this and let you know about some of the stuff that's going on in our profession, some of the great stuff that's going on in our profession. So before I do that, if you would, reach down there and hit the subscribe button. That means a lot to this podcast. And if you go ahead and hit that like button, if you like this podcast and you want to see more of it. Let me also take a moment to talk about Pepperball. Pepperball's been a longtime sponsor of the Prison Officer Podcast. I'm happy to have them on board. I work for Pepperball. I'm a master instructor, so I believe in the product. I've used it hundreds of times, and I can tell you that when it comes to having a tool on your tool belt or on the cart you take down range, whatever it is, Pepperball is one of them that I have to have on there because it gives me the ability to de-escalate a lot of situations without having to put hands on, without having to put my staff in harm's way. If you haven't done so lately, go to www.pepperball.com and check out the products they've got going. If you've never used Pava before, check it out. It's a lot different than OC. You can deliver it at a farther distance than you can OC. So check that out and tell them the Prison Officer Podcast sent you. So back to what I've been doing. I hate to admit this. I'm usually up on what's going on with corrections, but one of the things I missed was a group called One Voice United, and I had not heard of One Voice United. I didn't know what they were doing. They've been around for a little while now, and they reached out and invited me to be part of a panel for their next conference, and I was happy to do that. I was excited to do it. What made it even better was the fact that they also asked Pete Bloodworth from Corrections Unfiltered. So Pete was there with me, and Sarah Roebuck from the Lexapol group, who does Corrections One. Sarah's been my editor for a little bit, so we've talked back and forth on emails while she's helped me get some articles out there. And so it was a pleasure meeting her in person. And so her and myself and Pete got to hang out for a couple of days and see the best of corrections. I mean, that's kind of what I'm going to say. I think they highlighted the best of corrections in many ways. So, the first day, the conference theme was elevating our profession, which I mean, come on, that's a great theme. That's a great way to go about this. And we started it off, Sarah and myself and Pete. We started it off the first day with a panel. Well, we had a moderator up on stage. It was kind of cool. I hadn't done anything quite like that before, so it was pretty cool. But it was our jobs and our voices. And what we talked about was and I talked about this on the last episode, so if you haven't, go back and listen to Tevin Dixon and I talked about nature abhors a vacuum, right? And if we don't give the media the truth, if we don't reach out and be part of the story, they're going to fill it with whatever they want. And you see that right now. I mean, you can go out and watch a TV show about prison or a movie about prison or a news article about prison on one of the major media outlets, and it's almost always going to be negative. And the few things that corrections does put out tend to be inmates. Inmates got their GED. Inmates did this for the public, but rarely are the agencies really pushing the great job that corrections does, the great people that work inside. And so it was, what can we do to make that better? And so the reason they brought us in is because, Pete and I both run podcasts, and both of our podcasts are very positive towards corrections and not so much I don't know if you guys know this. I get several emails a week with people wanting to be on this podcast. And a lot of them are business leaders. I see you talk about leadership. I can come on and, I can talk to you about leadership. That's not what this podcast is about. It's about leadership, but it's about correctional leadership from the people who've been there, seen it, done it, right? That's who you're going to learn. That's who you need as a mentor. That's who we need to get, because we're different. We're not a CEO of a company somewhere that gets to sit in an office. That's not the way our world works. And I'm not saying there aren't things we can't learn from that type of leadership. But what you guys need and what I need is the leadership that comes from years of experience doing this job. The other thing I get a lot of emails about is, hey, I was an inmate and I want to come tell my story. I do good now. I've started a business, and I write them back and I tell them, I said, this podcast is for correctional staff. That's what I built it for. That's what I have ran it for. That's what its purpose is to uplift and build and train and empower and give knowledge and skills to correctional staff. So a very niche podcast, and I understand that. But that's part of the reason that they brought us on. How can we influence media? And this is how I influence media. This podcast is a direct result of my frustration, seeing all the negativity in the world about corrections. And I thought to myself, how am I I can either sit here and take this, or I can stand up and say something. So I built a podcast, and here we are today. But that's kind of what our talk was about. How does that affect the public view, the public sentiment towards our profession? And Pete and I both do the same thing as far as trying to build up corrections, trying to bring in the people who make this profession something to look up to, who bring on the people who train the new staff, who build the cultures, who lead the staff. And so that's so important. And Sarah was on that panel with us, and I want to thank Corrections One. I have several articles printed over there, but I think my first article was like 2015 with them. And they are one of the few media outlets that, they have focused on corrections. They have focused on making this profession better, and reporting it accurately and giving a voice to correctional staff. Almost everybody, if you look in the people who write articles for Corrections One, myself, Gary York, Gary Cornelius, all have corrections experience. And so that's so important that they actually are getting some of the information and some of those stories, at least, from the correctional professionals who've done the work. And so that's what that panel was about. How can we affect that? How can we build that? How can we give corrections a better name? I guess that's what I'll call it. So the next section of the One Voice United conference was, we had bringing this work back home. And they had some people up there who are doing big things in corrections to help corrections staff, to help this profession. One of them was a couple who have built a wellness program. They built it for their agency, but now it's expanding. It's going outside of their agency, and they're getting quite a bit of success going places and taking that wellness program to the people that need it. One of the others, and I don't remember the name of it right off, but it was about, and they were in Nevada. It's a group of, I think it's a union group, and they are working hard to bring the legislators who make the laws, who decide the laws that affect our everything, our working environment, our pay, all that stuff, to make those legislators stop and come take a walk through a prison. Now, I've been advocating this for years. If you're a judge, if you're a politician of any level, from county commissioner to president, you should be walking through a prison. You should go see what the results of our justice system are. So many people want to just take the criminals, put them behind the wall. Now I don't have to look at them. That doesn't mean they don't exist. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be involved in our justice system any longer. So those guys are doing a great job. They're reaching out to their, the congressmen, and I talked to them a little bit about some of the people that they've had come in. And so they've had congressmen and working on senators, and absolutely, let's bring those people into this conversation. if you're going to make the laws that determine how much we get paid, or even on the inmate side of it, if you're going to decide laws that spend money on rehabilitation or reentry, at least come through and see if your money's getting spent where it's supposed to. Because I think most of them would be surprised at the money that we're wasting on inmates who don't want it. And they'd also be surprised, in other words, some of the great stuff that we do that they don't see. I visited a prison a couple of years ago that was doing homes for humanity. That's great stuff. It truly is. But if they're going to put this money out there, if they're going to budget this money, they should know where it goes, whether it's good or whether it's bad. So more power to them on that, and I hope that they keep that going. They also had several speakers with some very powerful stories, and I won't go into all of them, and unless you were there, I don't think I could describe how powerful some of those stories were. But one that I thought was very unique, they had the president of the Correctional Officers Union out of New York, and he related the story of everything from the pressure he was getting from the governor's office, the threats even at some point that he was getting from the governor's office to get these people back to work, the union members who literally have had enough, of multiple shifts, of working conditions that aren't up to par. The New York system has a lot of trouble. It's an old system. Many of their institutions aren't safe places to work. And then you have minimum staffing or no staffing, and they're even less safe to work. And so the members had finally decided, look, even if we're not allowed to, we're going out on strike. And they did. And he was in the middle trying to hold this together between the governor's office, who eventually did, and I don't know the numbers, but the governor's office who eventually fired a large portion of those officers, and the officers who felt like conditions had got to the point that there was no compromise anymore. Their lives and their livelihood were at stake, and they felt like they had to do something. And here he was caught in the middle, and the stress. He told us about some of the health problems that came directly from the stress of what he was dealing with, and very powerful story. I really enjoyed hearing from him also. One of the other powerful stories that I got to hear about was, and I admit I didn't know anything about this. During 9/11, when the towers came down, people don't think about where was corrections? What was corrections doing? I'm sure if you ask most people, including me, unless maybe if you were in New York, I'd have said, well, they're making sure the prisons are safe and, they're taking care of that. But that wasn't the whole story. When you think about a mass tragedy like that and the way it affected that city, who would you look to have resources, to have the ability to step in an emergency like that and bring resources for the people that need it? Well, corrections is one of those. We're always prepared for large emergencies. So things like generators, floodlights, things that we keep on hand for, large disturbances. Unfortunately, body bags. Most agencies outside of corrections aren't going to have a large number of body bags for an event like that. And the other thing they talked about, and I got to meet, and I'm not going to go into their stories because I'm still hoping I've reached out to them and they want to come on the podcast. I want to have them on here. I want to hear their stories in depth. Phil Rizzo and Richard Palmer Jr. were both involved in that, and I got to talk to them. One of the things I didn't know, from the middle of the country here, I, listened to the news, listened to the media. I heard about guys working the pile. And I guess I assumed that was, all firefighters or all rescue. A large number of the people working the pile were corrections, were out of the New York Department of Corrections. And those guys stayed there for days. Some of them, I understood, for more than 30 days, they worked that pile. And that may not sound like much until you think about why they were there. And they were there the rescue effort didn't bring about a whole lot of rescue. They were recovering people. They were recovering parts of people. They were recovering evidence. They were breathing in toxic powder for days down there doing that. And I'm just surprised I never heard anything about it. Nobody ever mentioned corrections in the same breath as the 9/11 recovery. So very powerful stories on their part. Very interesting to hear. And this was all part of One Voice United. One of the other things they had there were vendors. And I got to talk to Angela Herron and Joe Ferraro, and they work for American Heroes Homes and Lending. And one of the things they said was that they help American heroes, military, law enforcement, fire departments, everybody get home loans. And of course, you know who I am. And I'm like, everybody? And they're like, yeah, everybody. And I'm the doubtful guy, because I've heard this over the years. Are you really reaching out to corrections? Because I've been the guy in the convenience store and the police officer walks up and they hand him a free coffee, no charge. And I've never asked for a discount, and I'm not going to. But I walk up in uniform behind the police officer and they say that'll be $225. The public doesn't generally consider us to be public safety, to be law enforcement, to get a law enforcement discount. Who's enforcing the law more than a correctional officer? I mean, the officer enforces the law for what, 30 minutes, maybe a couple of hours? We do it for lifetimes of these people. Anyway, so I'm a little skeptical, and so I start quizzing them. I said, okay, so what's the deal? Which correctional professionals do you want to work with? Are the ones that are law enforcement? What about the ones that aren't? And they're like, all of them. I said, okay, federal, state, yeah. Okay, what about jail? What about detention officers? What about private correctional officers? Yeah, all of them. We want to work with corrections, and because they consider us part of, public service. American Heroes Homes and Lending, they're not a lender, but they're going to walk you through it, and they're going to support you, and they're going to help you get the best deals, the best service. They have the connections to get you a home loan. And I talked to one of the guys that was at the conference, and he has went through them, and like 3 days later, he was going to close on his house. And so we had a phone call. I went through some of their stuff, then they told me more about it. And the more they told me about it, the more I absolutely believe that they want to help you. They want to work with you. It doesn't matter whether you're state, federal, county, whatever. If you're a correctional officer, give them a call, check them out if you're going to want to do a home loan. And I'm going to tell you, this isn't a commercial. They're not paying me anything. I'm not paying them anything. It was just something I saw at one of the vendor tables, and I was like, wow, that's something that could help correctional staff, truly. I mean, getting into a house, you want to talk about wellness in a family, outside of work, having a good house, not having to worry about bills quite as much. That's the kind of stuff that I think promotes good wellness. I remember when I was working and when I started, my wife and I were broke. We were broke as could be. And so, making that house payment and finding a good house to have your family in where they're comfortable, it makes a lot of sense to me. Check them out. Tell them the Prison Officer podcast had them on there, and let them know that you want to check out what they can do. I'd love to hear about it. Shoot me an email if you do reach out to them, and let me know how it works out for you. But they really impressed me. They're there for the right reasons. Joe's father is a firefighter, and they had problems with some house loans and stuff when he was younger, and he remembers that. That's part of the reason he got into this is, he wanted to help public service and American heroes. And so they work with law enforcement, military, firefighters, dispatchers. I know you guys get left out like corrections do. But reach out to them and let me know. Send me an email. I hope this works out. And I'll have links in the show notes here so that you can go to their website and get in touch with them. One of the things that I didn't know existed happened on the last night we were there. And One Voice United hosts the National Medal of Honor for Corrections, where they recognize courage, leadership, commitment, across the agencies, across corrections. And so I got to go to that banquet. I got to go to that event. It is so nice. I'm used to seeing somebody get a plaque, and then we go up to the admin office and we stand there, and some admin person stands next to us, the warden or superintendent or whoever it is, and we smile. And if they're really doing it, it goes on Facebook. But something nationally I had never heard of before. And so that's another reason I'm talking about this. I want to get that out there. But let me tell you about, and I've talked to some of these people about getting them on the podcast, so that may still be coming up. But the Gold Medal of Honor was Sergeant Julie Teague. She's from the Moberly Correctional Center here in Missouri. She saved a young girl from being attacked by dogs and was injured herself in the process. But she was the Gold Medal of Honor winner. Corrections Officer Obie Johnson, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, jumped in the water, saved a person. The Bronze Medal of Honor, Lieutenant Tyler Gaines from Dick Connor Correctional Center in Hominy, Oklahoma. He saw a police officer who was struggling with a suspect, and the suspect was trying to get the officer's gun, and Lieutenant Tyler jumped in there and assisted the officer. They also had some other awards, national level awards, an Excellence in Corrections Award for Case Manager Dana Mueller, Colorado Territorial Correctional Facility, Supervisor of the Year for John Coleman, North Carolina Correctional Enterprises, Raleigh, North Carolina, and then a Lifetime Achievement Award for Thomas White out of Ocala, Florida. So what a great night. Everybody was dressed up. The presenters were in tuxes, nice. They had, photographers, and everybody was dressed up, and a nice meal. It was just great to be part of that and to see corrections celebrated in that way. So if you haven't heard of them, reach out, go to One Voice United, check out their website, come to next year's conference, check it out, come to next year's banquet, and come see who's going to get there were hundreds of people who were put in for this. So there's a lot of good going on in corrections out there. And it was a pleasure to be part of a group who was recognizing that greatness in corrections. So, let's see what was next. Next, I came home for a day, and then I turned around and went to Gulf Shores, Alabama. And I know what you guys are thinking. Cantrell's got a rough life. He went from Atlantic City to Gulf Shores, Alabama, but it's the truth. But I'd been wanting to go to the Southeast Field Training Officers Association conference for a while, just to go take a look. Last year I worked for Command Presence, and last year I developed a CTO course. It's a 3-day course that follows the coach, train, evaluate method of field training. And I've adapted that for corrections, and I wanted to go down there and hear from field training officers what they're doing and what's working and what's not. And I got quite a surprise. I got down there, and I thought I'd be sitting in the back of the room as the only corrections person and just kind of listening and learning. And I get down there, and there's probably close to 20 correctional staff in there, correctional trainers in there. And they even gave us, I think the second day, we took a little hour or so and sat down as a group and talked specifically about correctional, what they're dealing with. Of course, recruitment, although I was surprised. There was a couple of agencies that said, at their sheriff's department, they're having more trouble with recruitment on the patrol side than they are the corrections side. They've had a lot of patrol guys come inside because, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, but kind of the stability of it. I think probably the defund police movement has a lot to do with how, police officers don't feel valued right now. And so they've had several patrol people come inside, and right now the correctional side is more staffed than the patrol side. So I found that interesting. But we also talked about, as correctional trainers, what's some of the stuff that we're looking at, how we build culture with staff, how we evaluate, and how we train new correctional staff. And we talked about, physical skills testing. Is that something that everybody still does? Certain places, it seemed there was no consensus on it. There was a lot of up and down about what level of physical testing there needed to be. But those were some of the discussions we had. But it was good to see that many correctional trainers in one place. And so I was happy to be part of that. They had some great speakers. I took lots of notes. I have, half a notebook full of notes that I took listening to them and some of the things that I picked up from those trainers. So it was very well worth my while. And if you get the chance, I'll have the links in the show notes, but Southeast Field Trainer Officers Association, check them out. I think next year's conference is in Raleigh, North Carolina. I think that's what they said. So check that out. That might be something you want to attend. Another thing I got to do was just a few days ago, I got invited to speak to a leadership class. Now, when I was in the Bureau, I was chosen as a part of the leadership group who got to do a year-long, once-a-month meeting, and we got leadership training. We did the John Maxwell books. We went through all that. We had outside speakers come in and talk to us about their journey. I remember one speaker in particular, he was an AW, and he talked about blind loyalty and how you have to be careful as you move up with blind loyalty, and had a very moving, powerful story that still sticks with me today. And so to be invited and come back and go back to a Bureau leadership class and be able to talk to a new group of upcoming leaders, I was excited to do that. So I agreed to do that. We did it by Zoom up at Yankton, South Dakota. And what a great class. I gave them, I talked to them about change. Right now, change is something they're dealing with a lot in the Bureau of Prisons. And I talked to them about how, in my mind, I reframe change when I feel that fear. Because everybody fears change. I mean, not just people. Move the furniture around in your house and see how your cat and dog deal with it, Change is not something that humans or mammals like. So how do we get past that? Well, the first thing I've learned to do is to reframe it, and I reframe it into a challenge. Okay, this is what's been decided. This is the direction I'm going. So my challenge is, how am I going to make this the best for my agency and my staff and my peers, the inmates? How am I going to move forward with this and make it the best I can? I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to understand why the decision was made. My job is to make it implement the best I can for the people around me. And that's how I handle change. But change follows, fear in everyone when we start talking about change. I talked about my path. Some of it I've talked about on here, being in the parking lot at 2:00 in the morning after a week's worth of doubles and 20-hour shifts, and not remembering where my car was at, and making that decision that I needed to make a change in my life, that I needed to find direction in my life. And I did. It turned out to be training staff was what brought me purpose and why I continued to keep working in corrections and excelling and promoting. And all of that can be traced back to training staff and wanting to improve what work is like for them. We also talked about, most of the things in life that are good are on the other side of fear. I talk about in my book, Power Skills, my world has always been full of doors, and not just metaphorically, I've worked in a prison, so we have doors, everything. I'm a turnkey, and I've been offered many doors through my life, and you never know which one to choose. And there's always fear about, stepping through that door. What's on the other side? How's that going to affect me? And one of the things I've learned to do, and that I talked to them about, was, build your skills, build your knowledge, build your confidence, and then walk through the door. And know that you can handle it, whatever's on the other side. Walk through it, handle it, move on. Sometimes those doors led me down paths that I didn't expect. Sometimes those doors led me down paths that I had to fight to get back out of. And sometimes those doors were a gift, that led me to places where I met people and did things that I'm very proud of. So don't be afraid of walking through those doors. And that was one of the conversations we had. So great time with them. I really appreciate them inviting me to be part of that, and look forward to hopefully doing it again in the future sometime. Well, I wanted to come on here and talk. I've felt so positive, and I read, it's been a couple of months ago, I read where a quote that said, If you only look at the weeds, you'll never notice the flowers. And it's kind of like doom scrolling, right? And if you look through corrections and it seems like you only see the negative. Well, I have had a month of seeing the positive. I've seen the heroes who stood up and did great things. I've seen the people who are working hard to improve this profession. I've seen the new leaders coming up who are excited about where they're headed and what they're going to be able to do. And so it's been a very positive month for me. And I wanted to share that with you. I think I'll leave you with one thing. Speaking of positive things, after many, 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 many years, my book, The Weight of Justice, Leadership Lessons from Inside America's Toughest Prisons, has been released. So if you would, go look it up on Amazon. You can also go to www.cantrellwrites.com. That's CantrellWrites.com. And you can find my books there. Not only The Weight of Justice, but Power Skills. And then for those of you that don't know, this big gruff guy who's now a grandpa wrote 3 children's books, and they're also listed there. I'm very excited about finally bringing that book to fruition. It's been a long journey. It's my memoir. So I hope you'll go check it out and enjoy it. Leave me a review on Amazon or shoot me an email and let me know what you think about it. I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys out there. But I think coming up, well, I've got several of these people I'm going to try to get on here. I'm going to go to Missouri State Pen, which is where my career started. And I think we'll talk about, some of those stories in that book and how that shaped me as a correctional officer. And we'll also have an upcoming podcast where I talk about the book and give you some insight into the stories and where they came about and how that book came about and the journey, because this truly has been a journey for me. So be safe out there. Take care of yourself, and I will see you next time. If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.